Welcome to another episode of Stoke Meter. And man, I don't know if I could get more stoked about a guest. I'm stoked about many guests, but Barbara Parsons, better known as Barbie the Welder. Barbie the Welder is a world-renowned metal sculptor. And as you can see behind her, this has got to be one of the most rocking backgrounds I've ever seen.
Awesome.
But Barbie,
I'm here. Hold on, but wait.
Oh,
so cool.
Yes! Oh my goodness! That is prior to the Caribbean through and through. Oh my goodness, Barbie, that is so awesome. Well, welcome. I love your smile. You just can't help but get happy looking at your face and knowing that you love what you do.
Oh, I'm so grateful for my life. I'm so grateful for what I'm able to do on a daily basis. I have to pinch myself often. It's very surreal. I've lived it and it's still very surreal to me.
Well, and it started from just, as I recall, you were watching what's the Tom Hanks movie? Castaway. And you said that you were inspired by at the very beginning, someone was welding and you couldn't take your eyes. Can you tell us about that?
Oh my gosh. At the time, I actually was living on welfare, like government subsidized housing. I was miserably depressed and spent most of my life depressed. Had already gone through and semi-recovered from alcoholism and drug addiction, had really just made some really poor choices for myself, put myself in some really bad places. And at the time, government subsidized housing, unhappily married, two beautiful children that were mine, and a beautiful stepdaughter that was from my husband. And I was barely surviving, like mentally, emotionally. I was working 7 days a week for myself, hauling scrap metal and selling stuff on eBay and even though I was working so hard, I was still only making $10,000 a year. My husband wasn't working. He had no desire to work. He did for a few months during our 8 years of being married, but just it wasn't who he was. It wasn't brought up like that. And so it was a very just low point in my life. And during that time, we went over to the neighbor's house to watch the movie Castaway starring Tom Hanks. And like very early on in the movie, there is this scene where like the FedEx dude walks into this big barn and it's very dark in there. And there is like these like beautiful like fireworks sparks. I'm gonna cry thinking about it. There's these beautiful fireworks sparks that are, come up and it's like someone's like behind the mask and you see it and you can see like these, these angel wings. And they flip up a hood and it's a woman. And I don't know if this would resonate with me if it was a dude doing this, because I know I've seen welding, I've seen it before. Nothing I've ever tried, never experienced it. But because it was a woman behind that hood, because it was angel wings that she was sculpting, which wings have a very, like, I can't explain it, but just it was the perfect storm for me. I don't know who Wilson is. I don't know if dude got off the island. I have no idea what happened. All I know is all I could think of about was like, I need to do this. Not that I want to. There was never like it was never a lukewarm desire. It was, this is who you are. And there was no, like, what I'm saying? Like there was no halfway about it. And it became a necessity immediately.
Oh man, those epiphanies are amazing, aren't they?
I've never had it about anything else in my life. And it's just like, it doesn't make any sense really. Cause like, again, like I have zero artistic, what I thought at the time, and I'll feel differently now. I didn't feel like I had any artistic ability and I'd never welded before. So it made no sense. Absolutely made no sense. And everyone I told that I was going to do it thought it was bat crap crazy.
You had never welded before in your life up to that point.
Never. I was an auto mechanic out of high school, So I'd gone to BOCES for auto mechanics, had gone to a couple of semesters of college for auto mechanics. I'd worked in the auto industry for a few years, but got out because I had a lot of problems with sexism. And at the time, with my depression, with me, I tried to handle it. I couldn't. So I just kept walking away from really good jobs because it just was, I guess I got like Eeyore, like, oh, bother. And just, just kind of left, just tail between my legs.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
so that kind of is interesting to me, because here you are depressed, so you're already not, people in a depressed state aren't really able to handle stuff very well anyway. Your level of tolerance is pretty low, and all of a sudden you throw on yourself this goal of, gee, I've never welded in my life. I'm a gal, and I'm going to go into art. So this doesn't sound like a Disney ending happened overnight after you saw that movie. You just threw yourself a big, tall order.
About 15 to 16 years between then and now.
Yeah.
So it's definitely has been a very long, very difficult, very rewarding journey that has grown me into someone, because I forced myself to do everything that was necessary in order to make this happen. Now, where I sit today, I had no freaking clue that I would become who I am, which again, I'll cry through this whole damn thing. I just knew I needed to make art. I never called myself an artist. I never thought of myself as an artist. I just knew I needed to create it. And so every single thing that I did, every single move that I made, it served that mission. It was like, okay, what's my first logical step? Because I didn't know. There's not a traditional, I didn't take the traditional, I'm going to art school. It was because of the blue collar mindset, the blue collar background in auto mechanics, it was learn to weld, learn how to weld. And then that was my logical first step. Yeah. So it just kind of, as it went, I had to grow myself in order to do it. I didn't know that going into it. I just knew, I'm like, oh yeah, I know I need to do this. Looking back, I literally just went on this mission of personal growth that has, I love me today. I'm the farthest thing from depressed ever. I spent the first half of my life wanting to die and driving down the road and just picturing myself driving into a tree. That was my normal everyday life. And I didn't realize it wasn't normal for everybody, because that's just the only thing that I ever knew. And so it just, as I progressed, I started learning, okay, that's not normal. That's something that, you have to, I say work on, but I really didn't intentionally work on it. It was losing depression, which it fell away. I don't take medicine. I don't take there's no nothing for it. I live a life that inspires me, and it's because I've worked towards that I started focusing on stuff outside of myself instead of sitting in my head going, oh, poor me, you're a single mom. Oh, poor me, you're on welfare. Oh, poor me. And I had all kinds of excuses to say poor me for. But instead of focusing on the stuff that I was upset about and sad about, I got the unhappy accent, right? Because I didn't do this on purpose, but I got this attitude of how can I? Mm-hmm. And it moved from poor me to how can I? How can I become a sculptor? How can I, how can I get a shop space? How can I get a welder? How can I get, everything became how can I? And so that mindset, it literally just, everything else fell away.
You were, oh my goodness. This is, first of all, I don't know about you, Gary, but man, I've listened to this. I go, man, I look at my life. I've had an easy, well, actually ups and downs, but your attitude, your mentality is so crazy. I before the show started here, I called you saucy. When I looked at your profile and such, I go, that's a saucy individual, man. And by saucy, I just mean you have that grit. And the other thing that, in knowing you now, in speaking with you, it's just that humility too, that you're an individual that came up through incredibly hard times and made sense of it all. How can I? what a powerful question. But there's something that you said too, and I believe it was in one of your interviews, and that is you failed your way to success. And I found that particularly not unbelievable. I found it very inspirational, because a lot of people look at failures with regret, and the folks that we've interviewed, they've had that opportunity or that way to make those a stepping stone. I'm just wondering if you wouldn't mind taking us through that mentality, how you went from wanting to just end it all to understanding you're failing your way to success and now.
Oh, wow. So I just kept following like the logical, what I thought was logical as far as getting to be a sculptor. So the first step was going to school, and it did take me, it took me several months to save up the money for it. I got into school. I had that was a massive success for me, because I was making 10 grand a year. School was $1,200. I mean, we couldn't even afford welfare at the time. So, I mean, it was that problem solving. So I gained that little bit of I was like, ooh, you did, can I swear? Or would you prefer I don't?
Go for it. We don't care.
Because I call myself all kinds of names in my head. And I'm just like, girl, you really, proud of you. It was the success that I was just awesome. Made it to school, got to weld. I was already in love with it. Got hired at a local custom fab shop, worked there, got laid off, and that was heartbreaking. And then got called back. And so getting called back was a win. And then, fixed my credit, which was a huge win. I bought my house. I bought this garage that has a house attached to it. I don't care about the house. I love the house. But I was having these wins that were starting to build me up. And so the whole journey to become, I started sculpting part-time at home after working on the weekends. And after I was working at that company 5 years total, I quit my job to go full-time as an artist. I knew I was going to quit it before I got it, because the whole purpose was a full-time artist. Now, this is where the failure sets in, is this part here, because I wanted to preview that.
Yeah.
I only knew I needed to make art. And so my only moves that I was making was in trying to figure out how to make this art. I took my fabrication skills and I started teaching myself how to make art. I would Google metal art. I would see something, I would reverse engineer it. Successful with that, because I'm a fabricator. I spent 5 years plus my 6 months of schooling learning how to fabricate. So that part came easy to me. What I did not understand is when I quit my job, I had a couple of I sold a couple of pieces, a local gun shop, bought secure gates, the windows, the bars for the windows and the doors. They bought a cabinet, and I made a couple $1,000s there. And for me, I'm like, effing jackpot, you're good to go, quit your job. And that's what I did. Now I had a mortgage, and as a single mom to 2 boys, who normally would prefer to have insurance, I already knew it, so I wasn't everyone else, my mom and dad cried. They definitely cried. It was you're making a huge mistake, and I sat in my garage, and not only was I worked 7 days a week, 16, 18-hour days, happily sitting in here making art. I started making nice art, things I was proud of. What I didn't understand was that I had to sell the art. I didn't know anything about branding. I didn't know anything about marketing. I didn't know anything to say, none of it. I didn't understand I was running a business. No, I'm not an ignorant person. And thank God I didn't think this through, because I probably never would have quit my job. When I quit, I did have, I had money saved up. I'd cashed in my 401k. I had a nice little nest egg in there. I figured if I didn't make money for 6 months, I still could pay my mortgage, which is number one, because that's where the shop is. And what I didn't take into consideration was the fact of when I did my math, I was only working in this shop part-time after working on weekends, which is probably about 30 to 40 hours a week I was working in here.
Wow.
When I went full-time, I'm now in here easily 100 hours a week, and that's probably lowballing it. It's probably closer, probably 100, 120 hours a week, that happily. But it was all making art, it was scary for me to post stuff on social media. I was so like, it feels so naked to make something that's of your mind that no one else has ever thought of, that you put out there for a whole world to judge. And it's something that like I spent, I think 7 years, 6-7 years up to the point where when I said I'm going to be a sculptor, to making my first full sculpture in my shop, I've never felt more raw or more naked in my entire life than posting that to social media. It took me 24 hours, but it was just like, I didn't understand leveraging social media to sell. I didn't know about sales, no clue. And so in the first few months, I ran all my money down because it was, and like most of it was spent on really smart things for the shop, like reinvesting it. I did buy a leg lamp. My son was pissed. It wasn't the best decision. It's a leg lamp. You need the leg lamp. But there, like it's just most of my decisions were good financially, but definitely like was going back into depression because I wasn't making any money, and it still hadn't clicked. I'm like, I didn't know how to make money with my art. And so it was really humbling, and I was failing, and it was scary because like, I literally just spent the last 7 years telling everyone I'm going to be a full-time sculptor. I quit my job. Now I left on very good terms. I gave them a month notice. I trained my replacement. I'm the only person in the history of the company that they gave a retirement party to who didn't retire. I mean, they passed a card. I mean, like I left with honor. I could have gone back at any time, right, but there's no way I could ever have gone back. Not here. Like they would have welcomed me with open arms. A wonderful company. They still try to get me. I'm like, not on your, not on your, I love you guys, but no. Amazing company. But there was no plan B for me. It was success or death. And I think that's the only way. And like what ended up happening is after 9 months of being full-time, I had like $35 left in the bank. I had no money coming in. My mortgage was due. Like my electric was going to be shut off. We didn't have we were eating ramen noodles again. I love them, but only when I want them, not when I have them. They're delicious. Thank you, Chop Ramen. But it was just such a humbling thing because I'm failing magnificently. So I've gone back into depression because I've got a workbench over here. It's got like tear-soaked spots on it. I was having a hard time coming into the shop. I'm like, I know this is what I'm meant to do. And I can't explain other than that, but I just didn't know what I was doing. And so, I mean, this is a massive failure, like massive, like the hindsight on it. I'm just like, oh my God, you're so stupid. Like, how do you not understand that you're a business owner, that you have to sell? I had been posting stuff here and there on social media. I started getting into social media a little bit, and it was Facebook and YouTube in the beginning, and then I added Instagram. But what ended up happening is, I think I added Instagram in the beginning. I ended up going to a show locally. It was my second show where basically you set up a table, your little booth, and like people come by, maybe they see it. And this is my hometown. So I'd set up one in Pennsylvania, which is like literally right over the border from me. Right. And then I think I made $35 there. Maybe $40. I mean, me and my son were sleeping in the Jeep, little Jeep Wrangler. Like haul everything down there, sleep in the back of the Jeep. You gotta sleep like this with your feet, right. Because like there's no room in it. And then we went and hit this show up here. And the only reason I went to the show is I already had $50 down on it. That's what it cost to get in. And I really didn't want to go. I was just so depressed. But I'm like, because I'd already invested in it, that's the only reason. So I go down there, and what ended up happening is they're chainsaw sculptors. These are people that do what I'm doing, but they take a log and they take a chainsaw and they sculpt it, and it's magnificent. And it was such a game changer for me because I watched these guys have this quick carve where they're all standing in a circle, and this is my hometown. So I got a mile from my house. New York State Chainsaw Carving Championship. So they're doing this and they're speed carving. And I'm watching all my neighbors standing around watching them. And when they get done speed carving after an hour, they auction this stuff off.
Wow.
And just shit clicked in my head. And it was like, oh, if someone could see you sculpt live, then they will buy your stuff. Like this was my, and I sold a couple things at the, like my neighbors are like, oh, feel sorry for this little girl because she's stupid and quit a job and can't make ends meet. I know they didn't feel like that at the time. So what ended up happening is I left that show with 2 brand new friends. Another thing that happened, it was just a game changer for me because I started sculpting out of fear in my shop. Instead of the love that I started out with, I started to sculpt because I needed to sculpt stuff, not because I wanted to make money. Making money was never an issue. And that's probably, it was never thought. And that's why I didn't make money. But I had lost that love of the sculpting. It went to fear. So during that quick carve, I watched this dude was doing his carving and he was like 3/4 of the way through and he's got the saw going and the smoke's billowing out of it. And I could smell the bar oil and the gas and it smelled. I love that smell. And, he's got headphones on and you can see he's like jamming the music. And I watched him pause for a second, take a step back and look at his sculpture and he nodded at it. If you've ever created something, this is a very special, like private moment of just like, I approve of what I've done. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I forgot about because I was sculpting out of fear and not out of love. I forgot that. I watched him have this moment that I normally have very privately. It's just such an effing powerful thing. It's just like, I love you. I'm proud of you. Like, I made you. Like, this is me. Like, this is from my head. Like, this is just such a, I watched him have it and I was just like, F the money. Like, F it. Like, forget about it. And magically what happened is, not magically, I worked my ass off for it. I went to every shop in my hometown that had welding curtains because my thought was, now I'm going to create a live welding show. Because I'm going to weld for audiences. They're going to watch me do it and they're going to buy my stuff. They're going to line up and just buy it. But I only had $35, which I made, I think I made like 100 or something like that at the show. Like hometown people, thank you guys. Like save my ass. But I went to all these different welding supply shops and hardware stores. And I was like, look, here's the deal. I'm going to create a live welding show. I need 4 welding curtains to go around me. And your banner. You donate these things to me and I will put the banner up behind me and I will promote you on my social media, which I had like a good solid like 500 followers at the time. Thank you to all of them. There's a lot of them that are still hanging on there. I'm impressed. But I was like, I will go and like, I will do this hustle. And I created it took me about 20 places to go into and everyone's saying no. Like the 20th or 21st place was just like, before I got the whole thing out, he's like, what do you need? And Praxair in Elmira, New York blessed me with 4 welding curtains, with the screens. And I took my shit on the road. I took my hustle on the road and I started going to these shows. I bullshitted my way into a lot of shows. I'm like, normally I charge $500 a day to set up, to do this, to entertain your crowd. But because I like you guys, I'll trade you for the cost of the entrance. Like, no kidding. I hustled my way into all kinds of stuff like that. And as soon as I got one, I'm like, oh, I've got this list of people that like, I've done it here and here. Would you like them for reference? And, oh yeah, like it definitely. And then, going to the shows, I started making money going to the shows. But I mean, I had to have those failures like that. I feel like if it wasn't for those failures of really screwing up, like it made me get creative. Like, Bob Ross, the amazing artist, talks about happy accidents. And Bob Ross is one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, but I'm going to violently disagree with them being happy accidents. I think these are intentional moments that have to happen in order for an artist to get creative, or a human being to get creative, because these are art enhancing moments. And had I not had to cut his sleeve off in order to fix his arm and the articulation of it, like it pushes me to be a better person. So every single failure is really a success. If you look at it that way, like these failures that I've had, if things were just really easy for me right off the jump street, I wouldn't be who I am today. Mm-hmm. These failures are necessary because of those, like because of all that, like I've written certain books because of how hard things were for me. And if I hadn't gone through those negative things, like it wouldn't allow me to, like, if I hadn't gone through drug addiction, there's certain people that I couldn't touch with my art, with my life, with my story. And thank goodness for that. Like, I'm so damn grateful for going through that, all of it. Because there are people out there right now who need me. And if I was some soft ass, with all due respect, and like everyone's got their own, own thing, but if I was this soft ass person, I just, life has always been easy for me. Like, yes, you can inspire people, always, every human being. Yeah. But there are certain people that I can reach that need me because of the depth of despair and addiction and homelessness and all this stuff. And if it wasn't for that, like, I wouldn't be who I am today. My art wouldn't be there. So these, like, when I say fell my way to success, it is with such gratitude, like all this hard stuff, like looking back, I'm like, I definitely, like, up in my shop, I've got a picture of one of my booth setups. I've got a red canopy, I've got a canvas tarp, I've got a silver tarp, and I've got a blue tarp, and it is ratchet as shit. And it's sitting in my shop. And it's days like this, and like me and my son froze there when it was cold, raining. And we're sitting there and no one's showing up because it's raining. I've spent, 3 hours of driving, all my gas money to get there. And like one of those things, it's like, you hope you make enough money to be able to make it to the next show. And it was like that for a couple of years. That picture is prominently placed in my shop so that when I have beautiful pieces like this that I start getting a little bit frustrated about because it's taken longer than I expected, I'm like, you don't have to travel for 2 hours to do this. You don't have to worry about gas money. You don't, like, remember the struggle. And so, like, staying humble is super important to me because, yeah, it's that struggle who's made me who I am. And there's other people out there that are in that. And I think if I was to get too comfortable on stuff, that I think I will forget about how hard it was to, like, that come up. Yeah. And I think staying that humble is, like, it just allows me to, I need to resonate with people. Like, I need to help other people out. Like, my mission was very selfish when I started. I just wanted to make art. Like, that's all I give a shit about. Like, honestly and sincerely, like, deeply selfish. And today,
I just guys. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're right. Yeah, I can't. Like, I need to inspire people. I need to believe in people. Like, no one believed in me, and maybe that's a really great thing because I had to like F it. I'll prove it to myself because I needed to prove it to myself before I could prove it to anyone else because I still didn't believe myself.
I guess the thing that stands out for me that I think is just so inspirational with your story is when I look at that sculpture behind you, and that is just a freaking masterpiece. And first of all, I love to weld. I love to fabricate. So we gotta talk some other time too. I totally geeked out when I knew we were talking to you. But anyway, the thing that I wanted to get to is that with the talent that you have and where you're at in your life, you could ride the social media wave of I'm perfect and I'm the best and I you know what I mean? No, I know it is, but I look
bullshit, and it's like you're only as good as the last thing that you do. Like, I can post stuff from like 3 years ago, but you're only as good as the last thing you do. And I was brought up like that. Like, that's my dad. Like, like, yeehaw! Like, you build a sculpture for Harley Davidson. Yeehaw! You build two. You build it for Miller. Like, great. That's 3 years ago. Like, what's next? Mm-hmm. Like, what's next? I feel like. I'm burping, excuse me. Normally I project. Like, I definitely am a projection burper. I pride myself on all my crafts. It is, I love to push myself. I have no idea what I'm capable of. And my gosh, like, how exciting is that? Like, if I could do this, like, imagine what it's going to look like in a year or two. Yeah. Like, I feel like I have I'm obsessed with metal. Like, absolutely, like, people are like, oh, like, you're addicted. No, I'm not addicted. I'm obsessed. Like, it's everything to me. I have to force myself to not work. I literally had to force myself to take Sundays off. And I'm like, the whole time I'm like antsy about it. I'm like, oh, I could be, social media. It's so much fun for me. But yeah, I need to create like I need to breathe. And I can't explain it other than that. Like, it's just who I am. Pushing myself to do this stuff is just like, it's my heart. I wish I had better words. Like, the girl who's written a lot of books, I had words fail me sometimes.
Well, the saying, what's that saying? It says that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Something
Which is bullshit, because I do work 7 days. You know what? Like, I've heard that before, and I do agree with it, because I do not work. I'm not allowed to work anymore. I only play in my shop, and I think that's a vibe. When you work, it's almost a negative connotation. Connotations there. There's almost just a negative vibe around it. Like, oh, I gotta go to work today. And so many people are negative about it. I've made a rule for myself that I'm not allowed to work anymore. I only play. On your note, it's like, I do work. Like, when these people say, you work for yourself and do what you love, and you never work a day in your life. You work all the days, but you're working for you incorporated, so you work twice as hard. I feel like.
Makes sense.
Well, you also said something earlier that kind of ties into this. Is before you were like, I got to do it for the money. I got to do it for the money. I got it for the money. And it wasn't until you saw that gentleman with the chainsaw, all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I got to get back to the love of it. And I think that's kind of the difference. Is the difference between loving what you're doing versus doing it because I got to bring in a paycheck. And you've definitely surpassed the paycheck drive. It's more of a, I love this and I'm going to do it.
Oh yeah, people talk about starving artists, and I'm going to eradicate that from the language, from the American language, from just the world. I literally, like, that's what my parents' entire fear was in me quitting my job, is these starving artists. And it's total horseshit. The reason why they have, like, and there is, like, it's a thing, because I know a ton of artists, and a lot of them are starving artists, with all due respect to all of them. But it's because, one, there's that saying, and two, they're living into what they believe is the truth. Therefore, it has become my ultimate mission to be the most successful artist that ever existed. Mm-hmm. The more successful I become, the more people can see how available it is for everybody. It's a 4-minute mile. So just by going out there and, is it scary for you? It really is, but it's learning exactly what to do, because they don't teach you how to run a business in art school. It's a massive fail. I am going to change that. Yeah. Single-handedly or with a team, I don't care what it takes. It's something that art is such a beautiful, any kind of creation, whether you're considered a crafter, fabricator, welder fabricator, that's an artist. I just made a post about it this morning. Like, craftsmen are artists. There's art in everything. I'm going to war over this. It makes me so, I just think it's crazy, because there is such a joy in creation. That moment that I watched that dude have that, like, and that's what built me up, is like, the things that I have built me. And that's what happens with artists. But the problem with that is, when the things that are building you are not bringing you in that income, it also breaks you down. And it's just like, but if you've got this, like, I'm a starving artist mentality, you literally breathe that into existence. And so, one, mindset is the first tool, is the best tool that we have. And by teaching people on how to, one, how to create the art, and two, how to sell it. Like, they need to learn that branding, marketing, and sales. And that's what I've done with my book, Honor Thy Art, is that I basically break the entire, like, everything that I've done, like, and I made it real short and sweet, so you don't have to dig through bullshit. I'm like, here's 72 pages. It'll take you an hour and a half to read it. Go be successful.
Well, what's it called again?
Needs artists. Honor Thy Art.
And then I assume you can get it on Amazon? Amazon
or on my Etsy shop. Yep.
Okay.
But the thing is, you've done so many books, and one thing that I love the fact that you're doing them all, because it has inspired so many people. There's one thing that is so obvious about you that that was also mentioned, and that is one of the blueprints for an inspired life is to be unapologetically authentic. And oh my goodness, you are living
poster child.
Unapologetically authentic. I love it. I love it. You'll call people where they need to be called on. You don't get an argument as much as you have the dialogue. It's an amazing thing. And looking at the titles of some of your other books, I love them because you do have that the inspiration blueprint. The other one is the FU fuel. Of course, I'm not saying the word straight up, but I think people get the point. And that, when I saw that title, first of all, I was laughing my head off, but it brought out that raw emotion that went into that book. And what are some of the things that were going through your head when you were writing that book?
Oh, it's literally step by step how I pulled myself out of depression and became a world-renowned metal sculptor. Yeah. I mean, just like you want to talk about night and day, but it was in the beginning, I had everyone that doubted me. And on top of that, because I had gone through all the depression, the addiction, everything else, I still wasn't making the best decisions for myself. I still struggle with it on a daily basis. But I was making bad decisions. So when I went to quit my job, this is like dedicated to this MF. When I went to quit my job, there was a guy I worked with who I didn't understand it at the time because I wanted to be loved so damn much. I ignored every red flag. And this guy saw the fact that I had saved up money, that I had a nice chunk of money in the bank. I had talked to him about it on break. He manipulated me. He pretended that he loved me. He used me for that money and had me move my house, move my son to a different school with the promise of help me build this little apartment above my 2-bay garage. It's going to give you twice as much room to work, 2.5 times as much to work in. And then we're not going to have to pay any bills. So you're going to have very low overhead. And I was like, jackpot. It just made sense to me. I rented my house out to my older son. So like my mortgage was covered here, which meant I was going to have, like, literally was living for almost free once we remodeled his garage. We remodeled the garage and then he physically beat me up.
Oh,
and
you're kidding. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, it is what it is. And I'm so grateful for it because of him. I left with my tail tucked between my legs, but I also left with the mentality of like, F you. I will show you that you made the worst decision of your life. Now, I did lay awake every night for about a year pretending like I was going to kill him. Like, I'm not beat around, you know what I'm saying? Like, I definitely like was premeditating some shit. Had I ever gone through it, like, definitely would not have held up to the court of law. Right? I will be honest about it. I wanted to kill him. I was so angry. I was so crushed because that's one of the reasons I had so little left in the bank. I was also burning through it.
Yeah. But
wanted to be loved so much, I ignored all, like, looking back, I'm like, you dumb bitch. Like, really? Because, you know, but because he did that, I used that anger that I had towards him as fuel, and I fueled my way to success. Now, in the beginning, it was with anger, and that's what I talk about in the book. Like, it is like a rocket ship taking off, and the whole thing is based on fuel and rocket ships. So when you first take off from your launch pad, like, you need a ton of fuel. That's where you're using, I think it's 75% fuel. And you really need that, like that FU, like FU, I will show you. Shame on you for ever effing with me. Shame on you. And so, like, in the beginning, you need that. But what ended up happening is, like, that fueled me, that drove me. And I was just like, I will become so effing successful. You will regret the way you treated me for the whole rest of your life. Like, that's a vibe, completely and utterly. And unashamedly, that's why I was just like, yeah, you're going down. So, what ends up happening after a while is when I was having these successes, it like, you know, after a while, and it did take some time, it stopped becoming about that, like as much about that. I still think about it every now and then, and I do. But it became like after you break through that atmosphere, after you break through that gravity, that barrier, you need less and less fuel. So you need less and less of that anger. And what ended up happening for me is that anger ended up turning into gratitude because I saw the life I was building for myself. And I saw that my sons were seeing me make good decisions for myself. And I saw like I was starting to have found it. And it took a couple of years. It definitely took a couple of years to go from that. But that fuel, that like, you know, my mom and dad doubting me, my, you know, like just everyone doubting me and all that. And they're just like, you're going to fail. Like no one believed in me. Like, and I was just like, F the world, I will show all of you. And so, yeah, a lot of this is like, what you're saying now was just like, it was all that FU fuel. Like, I'll show you. And it's turned completely and utterly into gratitude. I think about dude every now and then, just like, you know, I feel sad for him now. Like I used to be really angry. And maybe he's given himself a wonderful life. And like, I hope so, because a human being that's going to do that to someone else does not love themselves. And I do feel very, very sad for him, but also I try very hard not to waste any time on someone like that. But I'm empathetic towards him now, where I'm, you know, he has a chance to change his life too. Maybe what happened, maybe that changed. And who knows? None of my business what other people do. But no, I know he's gone through some tough stuff that I heard through the grapevine that I was heartbroken about.
Right.
You know,
Well, it sounds like a big part of a big lesson that I'm taking away from your story is like you're saying, so much of it about is getting that momentum going. And the hard part is it seems like you started that at a time when you were very vulnerable, very, you weren't at your strongest, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that's such a lesson for people to take into account and to listen to is it's gonna be hard. Just because you saw that movie and you were inspired, again, it wasn't a Disney ending the next day. You went through hell and back, you know?
It started out with the how can I? And that's like, instead of poor me, I spent my whole life going poor me, like literally my entire life up until that day. And we're talking, that was some years. It was all poor me. It was poor me, the single mom, and poor me and this one, and pour me another drink. It's bullshit. It really is just, I was feeding. Oh, there's a wonderful story about an old man and his grandson. And the old man says, grandson, we have two wolves that live inside of us. And there's a better, like, I'm sure if you read the whole thing, this moment's better. But there's two wolves that live inside of us. And the grandson says, which one, you know, the grandpa says, the two wolves that live inside of us, one is anger and the one is love. And the grandson says, which one wins? And the grandpa says, the one that you feed. And so if you are feeding the poor me wolf, then that's all you're going to get is like, that's the one that's coming to the forefront. That's the one that's going to run and live your life by. If you are feeding love, if you're like a problem solver, and look at, you can change your belief about yourself in seconds. So my belief about myself now is I'm a problem solver. I'm not like before I'm an artist, before I'm a welder, before I'm anything, I'm a problem solver. It's who I am. And so I'm like, how can I sculpt a beard? It's literally and then it's just like, how can I? And so all you have to do is reference one time in your life where you've solved a problem. And you'd be like, you know what? Like, my armpits were stinky and I put on deodorant. Like, you solved the problem. Therefore, you are now a problem solver. You can literally continue to think about things in your life that you've solved problems. And this can become your new reality. Instead of focusing on like, I'm so depressed, I'm on welfare, you know, I have to stand in the food line, you know, I can't feed my kids, I have to live in the projects because I can't afford anywhere else to live. Like, you could focus on all that negative stuff, and that's what you're going to continue getting into your life. One little tiny mindset change of I'm a problem solver, it now puts you going to work on how can I get out of the projects? How can I not have to stand in the food line anymore? how can I learn how to weld? How can I learn how to, whatever it is, how can I change everything for me? And if there's one thing I could, put out there to everybody, and like one message I could send is just think about in your mind times that you've solved problems, is whether it's a simple thing as deodorant or something fancier. It only has to be as simple as I put on deodorant to fix my stinky armpits. You're now a problem solver, and like living into that. And then every time you're faced with a new solution, like I'm sitting in the house, it's cold out and I've got to go get my mail, I can put my jacket on. I'm a problem solver. Like literally, like just as simple as that is, but it becomes a program that you're like reprogram yourself into thinking about. And it's just the most game-changing thing that you could do for yourself.
I can't.
Love it.
Love it. I am so inspired to by what you're saying. First of all, it's no wonder that you wrote a book called The Inspiration Blueprint. But the inspiration that I'm getting from you, the analogy of the most of the fuel being used to get out of orbit and coming into those realizations, that really got me looking at how pathetic I've been in some of my own cases, where you utilize that fuel for things that are not productive. And when I hear how you did that and how that mind shift came toward the individual that was so abusive, good grief, that's not an easy place to come to. It really isn't. And the other thing too is moving from feeding a problem, the analogy of the wolves as well. Which one
that's
is?
Not mine. That's a fable.
Yeah,
I think,
no.
like,
I know.
It's one of my favorites. Yeah, it's like a grandpa Indian was talking to his grandson or something like that. It's just, I have a wolf thing. I love wolves. And so that one spoke to me. And there could be other analogies that work better for people, because like the angel wings resonated. Like if that wasn't a woman with the angel wings, like maybe that wasn't something that, like, it's just because that was at that time, like, I have a wolf thing. So that one really spoke to me. It's like, which one am I feeding today? And like any given moment, like my kid, doesn't wake up with this alarm clock, and I have to wake him up again. I'm like, which wolf are you gonna feed?
It is. Everything that you have spoken about today, though, has been something that would inspire so many. And I'm hoping so many people listen to this, because those different types of gravitational pulls, I'm going to go back to that since you use a rocket analogy, are real. Man, it's not like it's something you fix overnight. And your consistency, your persistence, and I used the word earlier, grit. I'm looking at that art behind you and the people that you are able to touch because of that in such a positive fashion is all a testimony of who you are as an individual. And I can't thank you enough for sharing that and sharing that vulnerability, man. You got that good old grin on that.
Like I said, first of all, we got to talk again, because what's interesting about this discussion that we've had is you are an artist of incredible metal sculpture.
Yes.
And that really hasn't even been the focus of our discussion. And I think the stuff that we have been talking about is just, if not more important than the amazing art that you create. You know what I mean? Like your story and your inspiration and what you're putting out into the world is just as important as that amazing stuff that you do. And that says a lot when you look at what is behind you and the things that you're creating. And everyone go to Barbie the Welder's website and just look at her gallery. And for me to say that this discussion is as important as her art, you'll get a perspective of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Well, Barbie, I hope that we can do this again. And before we sign off, though, after we turn this off, please stay on the line for a second, because there's a lot more to talk about in a second here. But I want to thank you for the time you've given us for this podcast, because it's made me a better individual. And I have a feeling that so many people are going to be impacted by it as well.
For sure.
I am so grateful for your guys' time. Thank you kindly for allowing me to share my story with your audience. It means the world to me.
You are awesome. Thank you.